Hello, everyone. So, another podcast today, and I have a dear friend, Parm Chohan, with me. Parm is a leadership and communication coach based in Greater Toronto area. Um, I only met Parm once, uh, briefly at a conference, and that is even after almost 2.5 years of knowing each other via LinkedIn. We follow each other. We get inspiration from each other. At least I get inspiration from Param a lot. And I'm a big fan of his radio voice, his delivery, and it's just amazing the way he delivers. He selects his words so carefully, and he's just amazing in that. Um, so I thought, why don't I invite him for this podcast, help my audience understand what communication skills are, how he developed his whole journey as a coach, what worked, what did not work for him. And so it will be similar to the other podcast, a little bit of his story and some guidance for the audience. So, Param, welcome to this podcast.
Ahmad, thank you very much for having me. I appreciate the kind words, and the feeling is mutual. I get a lot of inspiration from everything that you share and what I'm learning from you. So, always a pleasure to spend some time talking with you.
Oh, that's amazing. And believe me, this is for everyone who is watching this video or maybe watching it only on YouTube, maybe on my LinkedIn. Please stay connected with people because, as I always say, our network is our network. You need to know the right people and more of those right people. So, we'll start with your story, Param. Who is Parm Chohan? So if you could just um, take us through the corridors of your early professional career, or maybe your schooling. Where did you study? What did you study? And something around sports and stuff like that.
Yeah, for sure. So I can give you the Cole Notes version. I went to York University for my undergrad, and I started off doing computer science. I didn't enjoy it. I didn't enjoy it, which probably is the reason why I was doing so bad, and vice versa. And I would say probably for the first year or so, I felt like dropping out almost on a weekly basis, and I would be on the phone with my mom on a regular basis, or when I'd come home on a regular basis, just saying that, hey, I'm not enjoying this. This is not for me. I don't want to be here. I'm glad I didn't drop out. I just couldn't find the right fit. It was a brand new school. My friends weren't there. So it took some adjustment. I realized about a year and a half in that computer science just wasn't for me. And for those that are exceptionally well in computer science, that's fantastic. It just wasn't for me. It wasn't something that I understood. I wasn't connecting with it. And therefore, my grades sucked and they weren't good. So I made a jump over to business, just a general business administration degree. Funny enough, a certificate in HR, which is a bit of a full circle moment considering the work that I do now. So graduated York, started working in nonprofit. Uh, Incidentally, it was the same organization that the nonprofit that my mom was working at. Did some work there, and then continued to move on. And I found that everything that I started to work in, and some of those positions and roles and responsibilities, had elements of public relations and communications. I just didn't know it at that point. So I decided to do a bit more research on what PR and communications is all about, and found a program at Humber College. They have a fantastic postgraduate public relations certificate. So it took some time to make the decision. I decided to leave work and invest in that program. And that was great. That post grad Humber program really taught me the nuts and bolts of public relations communications. And it was fantastic, absolutely invaluable. So completed that in the year, went on to do some more work and started to move closer to being in the world and the roles and responsibilities and jobs of PR and communications. That continued to evolve. And then I remember it still very clearly. I was working for one organization, one company, and I was let go because of a reorg. reshifting our priorities and job descriptions. And funny enough, in and around that time, my wife and I had just gotten married, and soon after that, I made the decision to do my master's. And I've always wanted to do an MBA or a master's of some kind. I took the GMAT to do my MBA, and I didn't do well on the GMAT. Uh, with full transparency. So I learned about the MCM program at McMaster, which is a Master's in Communications Management. That really intrigued me. And because I had already done the postgrad PR certificate at Humber, doing a master's in communications management really made sense. So I applied. I was fortunate enough to get in. I completed that program within the time frame of 2 years, lots of ups and downs even throughout that time, and then came out on the other end working in communications. And I did some work for Region of Peel. I spent a good amount of time at Tanna Caledon, so regional government, municipal government. And then soon after that, COVID hit and things started to evolve and change. And I found myself working in the field of leader development, team engagement, coaching, which is all in the people development, you know, category sector circle of work, which connects back to the HR certificate I did way back when in my undergrad degree. So I mentioned full circle. It's funny now that the work that I'm doing is all related to people services, people development, and then eventually incorporated Conquer Leadership, which is my consulting practice. And now Conquer Leadership, I solve the problem of potential. Because I do what I fundamentally believe, Hamad, and I fundamentally believe that we are all more capable and powerful than we will ever know or be able to give ourselves credit for. And I serve teams, leaders, individuals to tap into that potential because when they do, when they truly tap into that potential, it changes the trajectory of careers and lives. And I do that specifically through leader development, team engagement, coaching, and a whole. Even within that, there's a lot of different ways. But
Yeah, so that's
that's a
amazing.
very quick rundown of how I got
Yeah,
to where I'm
no,
at.
I really, so basically, what I was just kind of trying to kind of link things together is that you pretty early in your studies, you realize that you didn't like what you were doing. So uh, I think in particularly South Asian communities, kids are forced to do certain things, right? And computer science is probably one of the things that or going into medicine, or going into law and accounting. These are some of the things that, we bring in from back home somehow or the other, and we try to implement the same thing. But the Canadian education ecosystem is such that one could experiment, right? What you did, you didn't like it, then you realize, okay, I think I like this, let's try it. And you actually kept investing into yourself. This is one key message that I got. Uh, you didn't like it and you just completely did not leave it. You kind of moved on and experimented with new thing. You couldn't get into MBA. That was fine. But that's also an ambition for most of South Asians, doing an MBA. One of my students who I coached about career development and LinkedIn and whatnot, uh, was already an MBA from back in Pakistan. He came here, he's doing another MBA. I said, what is the point? You should do something on top of what you had done before, basically. So, like you said, you already had the certificate program you'd done, and that actually paid off. The HR program that you did, that actually paid off. So all those kind of combining relevant skills and the knowledge really works. So you actually kind of you didn't plan it. I know we don't plan things, but whatever you did it so nicely that, combination of all those things really, really helped shaping Param Chohan, the way Param Chohan is. Have you ever realized how a radio voice you have, or somebody ever told you that your voice is a radio voice ever?
I've been told a few times that I seem to have a good radio voice. Maybe that goes with my radio face. So,
No.
but it's it works out well because I also have a podcast where I get to speak with entrepreneurs, leaders to highlight lessons of leadership and personal excellence, personal growth. So,
So
I
tell
guess
me about
having
that
a radio
podcast, Param.
voice.
Tell me about the podcast. How did you come up with that idea of starting a podcast? I think that would really be interesting.
Yeah, so it's always been on my list of things to do. I mean, I've got the equipment, and I had invested in the equipment intentionally a little while back. It's always been on my list of things to do, but I had also strategically and intentionally not pulled the trigger on it, and up until middle of last year decided that I wasn't going to start a podcast just yet because I know of the time commitment involved, and time is already at a shortage for me these days as it is. However, sometimes things happen and you're thrust into these opportunities. So I was speaking with a friend of mine who's in the media space and does videography, photography, and we were talking and we'd been kicking around some ideas and how we can partner together and maybe some kind of a podcast. And I ended up interviewing him as my very first episode. And he ends up then connecting me with a stack load of other potential guests. And it ended up being, I guess, a blessing in disguise because I had no choice at that point to take action with all of these introductions, or at least it made sense to take action because he was kind enough to introduce me to some very fascinating and very amazing people. So while I had planned not to start a podcast at that time, it just happened the way that it happened. So I'm fortunate enough to be able to have some fantastic conversations with very talented people to really highlight lessons of leadership, lessons of personal growth, personal excellence. And we just get to both, whenever we're talking with the guest, get to show our areas of expertise and specialty and hopes that it'll inspire and share some lessons with others.
That's amazing. I will share the link of that podcast in the description of this video. You could go and subscribe to the podcast. And also, Param writes a newsletter, which is great. So you can also subscribe to that newsletter. I'll leave that also in the link in the description of this video. Uh, so it's all about taking initiative. You use the word action. A lot of people only um, dream of doing big things. I think this is also, we have been brainwashed. I always said people don't like it. We've been brainwashed to dream big, but just dreaming big doesn't work. I mean, you could dream big of doing big podcasts, but if you don't have the right equipment, you won't be able to do it. Or if you even invest into equipment and never take the next action, which is actually reaching out to people and talking to them, it's not going to happen. And another interesting thing, Param, what I have seen, people think that all that requires huge investment, but starting something just to experiment with and just to learn how it can be done is usually you can actually do with whatever you have, like whatever little equipment you have, you could actually use that equipment and do it. So, for instance, at this point in time, I'm sitting in my basement. I do these podcasts sitting in my basement. The only proper background in this basement is this background which is behind me. I actually created myself. It's wood basically, cardboard and a paper pasted on the cardboard. That's about it. A real plant here, a little shelf here, and of course a little bit of investment in lights and the other little equipment. So action really is where the real leadership skill, I think one can explore your leadership skill by taking that first action, or I call initiative. Um, so let's talk a little bit about leadership. I mean, you have been coaching people, entrepreneurs particularly, in predominantly doing two. major things, enhancing their leadership skills and improving their communication skills. What are some of the things that you have found usually, like the missing link when you coach people? Like what are some of the things that people don't realize? And if they start doing it, their leadership skills outshines and the communication skill improves as well.
Hmm. Hmm. Great question. One of the first things that comes to mind with some of the city managers and senior level municipal government staff I've had the pleasure of coaching, confidence has come up a few times. And what I mean by that is these individuals and these leaders not feeling as if they are equipped enough to lead, or sometimes a little bit low on the confidence scale, not fully embodying that that leader that they know they can be. I have the privilege of being a thinking partner, a talking partner, a strategic advisor to these leaders, and it's incredible to sometimes hold a mirror up to these individuals and through their examples shine light back on the fact that they are already accomplishing great things. And yes, there might be some elements for them to tweak. Maybe they just need to practice how to have difficult conversations. Maybe they need to practice a little bit more on the emotional intelligence piece. But it's interesting to see, Hamad, that when I do hold up a mirror, they get inspired by what they're already accomplishing. So sometimes that self doubt, those limiting beliefs, that imposter syndrome can really get in our way. And I'm also of the belief that if you're putting in the work, then maybe imposter syndrome is indication that you're moving towards some kind of growth. I don't think we're meant to get rid of imposter syndrome. I think we're meant to get good at it because it's also an indication that we're moving out of our comfort zone and doing something different, unique, scary. That's good. That's a good thing. As long as you're not breaking the law, don't do that. As long as you're being inappropriate, that scary stuff is good because that means evolving. We're evolving, we're growing. So, one of the biggest things is really holding up a mirror to these senior leaders and saying, hey, give yourself credit. You're doing some fantastic things. Yes, we can hone in on a few other bits and pieces. So, that's probably the biggest thing. One of the other pieces is how to navigate difficult conversations because conflict is never fun for anybody. And what I often coach leaders through is perhaps you come up with some kind of a framework that helps you. And I've got a couple of different frameworks that I lean on, but perhaps you come up with a framework to help you, to help guide you through some of these difficult conversations so that you can at least organize your thoughts, which means you're hopefully able to organize the conversation a bit better. Not to say it's going to go the way that you envision it 100%, but even if it's a small percentage of that direction, that's still a win. And you might need to have a couple of different conversations with that individual on that particular subject matter or topic. But at least if we've got a framework, you can then evolve it, tweak it, edit it once you're in motion, once you're in practice, to see what approach lands best for you.
Yeah, or on the communication side, I've got another follow-up question on this. But on the communication skill side, what are some of the things that uh, I know confidence is always going to play the probably the biggest or probably take the biggest space in that conversation because communication, I think your confidence is it's primary. If you're confident, then you can do a little bit more into communication. But on the communication skills side, what are some of the things that you realize that people don't appreciate? They already are gifted.
Mhm. Being being selective and careful with the language that you use and being as direct as possible, depending on the situation, timing, urgency, especially when it comes to difficult conversations or even reward and recognition. Being timely and specific is important in both of those two instances. But when it comes to communication, I find it's important to have clear language, to be concise when it's appropriate, and a couple of other smaller than bits and pieces is varying your cadence, your rate of speech, the pausing, have some variance in your tone, pitch, all of that. helps make your communication style stick that much more. What I also remind folks is the fact that communication happens in three ways, right? It's the words that we use, how we say the words, and then the body language and facial gestures. And I'm borrowing from my program on EI and conflict, but the words we use are incredibly important. Most of how we communicate is how we say the words, and then the body language and facial gestures. So most of how we communicate has nothing to do with the words we use. Not to say words are not important. They are. Language matters, but so does how you say the words and then the facial gestures and body language. So all of that needs to be packaged, practiced in order to eventually get better. So I'll often remind folks and remind leaders I'm working with, and also remind myself. It's still a work in progress for myself. I still catch myself needing to focus on any one of those three things, but keeping in mind the words we use, how we say the words, and then the nonverbal communication.
That's totally fascinating. And I so, we really need to keep doing kind of the word probably is self-diagnostic. So just keep keep looking at your own self. You said you talked about mirror, showing them the mirror, which is making them realize uh, what what are they doing already, like what good things they're already doing. So that kind of giving them a little bit of a an inspiration of your own selves. So I write sometime I people get inspired a lot by other people, but not many people not many, at least I have seen, they inspire from their own things, or instead of getting impacted from outside world, they they don't impact themselves, right? They don't say, okay, I've done a wonderful thing, other than few people, like for instance, I this morning uh, our joint friend Doreen wrote me a message, and I
Mm.
used that message in writing that post today. And I call her the story chef. So I'm just taking that word chef here. So chef, just think that you're a chef. When a chef cooks, he really loves that. You have to love what you're doing. And that actually is an inspiration that you can give to your psychology to do bad things in a better way. And you will learn and you will improve and you do it better every time you deliver it. You know, I've been doing these training programs, I don't know, for probably 20, 25 years. But every time I do this session, any session that I do like weekly session and stuff, I prepare myself. So what I did in this podcast, Param and myself, we talked a little bit about. So he sent me a list of things that we could discuss. And about 20 minutes before the start of this podcast, I sent an email back saying that no, we will discuss this. Although it was only 20 minutes, but a little bit of preparation, a little bit of thought
Mhm.
process has to go into your own thing. And please start inspiring yourself, whoever is listening. I think we all keep doing things. And one of the things that I hear a lot also, Param, I'm sure you do also when you work with younger generation, they complain that they don't have experience. And I say, I mean, you're already 20 years of age. You say you don't have experience. You have probably done volunteering. You have done some work in the university. You have done projects. You have probably made presentations. How can you call yourself that you're not experienced? You may not have the hardcore experience of doing something, but you've developed some skills that you can harness more when you go into the job market or you start your own business. What was the time? I mean, you briefly mentioned that you started your coaching practice. What was the time, number one, and number two, how come that thought came in your mind that, I should start a coaching business, or I should become a coach?
That's an interesting story, and again, sometimes when things are meant to happen, they're meant to happen. You can't really put timing or planning to that. So, well into my communications career, I'd I thought so. Public speaking has always been in the back of my mind that, hey, I wouldn't mind doing public speaking, getting involved. I don't seem to have a problem, as weird as that might be. I don't have a problem getting up in front of people and speaking. And in the back of my head, it's always been, okay, I'd like to try public speaking and do that. I just didn't know where to go and how to get trained up and learn how to do that. And I several years ago, I ended up logging onto Facebook, and I saw a post of a family friend, and he had shared a video of his daughter, and his daughter was 15, 16-year old at that time, and we've known this family for a very long time. And her video inspired me, and she was talking about growth mindset, evolving, personal growth, personal excellence. So I called him up and I'm like, "Hey man, your daughter's talking about some powerful stuff. What's going on? I don't remember any of this from before." So he and I start talking, and he shared with me a number of fascinating things, including the program that she had gone through for youth, all on personal growth, personal excellence, personal effectiveness, and they have an adult and professionals program, and part of that involved public speaking. So that was my hook, and I thought, okay, maybe this is my way in, until I realized that no, this is a whole coaching program, a leadership development program. And I also realized that I had been doing all of that throughout my career anyways, casually, informally, in the community space. So while the language was new, because I hadn't heard of leader development or coaching before, or masterminds, while the language was new, the work was familiar. So I thought to myself, okay, this is interesting. This can't just be some stroke of luck. There's got to be a reason why I'm having these conversations with this family friend. I've found out this program. There's got to be something here. So it took some time to think through, but decided to make the investment and start diving into this work that much more. And I incorporated Conquer Leadership in and around that time several years ago. And now I get to do this work, uh, and I'm that much more skilled. I've got the right resources, tools. I've got access to coaches around the world. I get exclusive updates and insights on industry trends as it relates to training and development, people services, human resources, because I'm tapped into those audiences. Uh, and 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 now I get to serve people with that much more intention and focus, which ultimately impacts their performance and results as well as mine. So again, sometimes things happen when they're meant to happen, but I also had to have been ready to take action. And there's also been a lot of preparation, Hamad, a lot of preparation. I can't tell you how many hours I've spent at my computer desk, just learning, evolving, tweaking, failing, and then you reflect, correct, in action, in movement, not just thinking about it, not just strategizing and planning, but ultimately taking action.
So that's so I really loved the way you explained the failing part. Then, and in any business or even at jobs, you know, failing is good. I think that actually helps us challenge ourselves. I remember my first online e-learning program that I developed. By the way, that program is still running. And when I watch it, and people are getting benefit of that whole program. Now I watch it and say, Hamad, is this you? You created this whole program? It's all rubbish. Whenever I have some space, I'm going to recreate the whole program. And again, Param, I know you also read a lot, and readers are leaders. So a lot of things that we learn from other people, right? The way the way they deliver things. If you're looking at public speaking skill, or trying to build that speaking skill. So I love I, for instance, love Barack Obama, the way he delivers, the way he chooses his words, the way he actually, his facial expressions, all these three things. I mean, just amazing. So if anybody wants to really get an instant inspiration from someone, and wants to kind of mimic someone, I would suggest, consider Barack Obama as someone, he's just amazing. And So get that and keep learning. So Param keeps learning, and I'm sure when I develop any coaching program, it's exactly the same. Creating a framework, fixing that framework, then plugging in all the missing things, and then creating content around it. Um, and that really helps because ultimately the goal for any coach like Param or myself is to help our clients, to help our students achieve their goals. And we could only do it if when we actually help ourselves grow. And as you can all, I'm sure, can say now that Param has been investing into himself, and that's the way it is. So take an initiative and be intentional. So another word that was kind of coming to my mind, Param, from this conversation, you have to be intentional. If you're not intentional, nothing else going to happen. So you will only take action when you're intentional as well, right? You will be able to like meet people like you've invested into your training, learning how to become a bigger trainer, the coach, and everything. And now you're part of that ecosystem that is supporting you. Somebody sitting from outside thinking that he or she should become a coach and not actually investing into herself is probably a dream which may come true, but you know it won't be that easy. Um, Now, what I am really dying to hear from you, Param, is uh, three things that you suggest, or you suggest someone who is struggling into leadership and communication, uh, someone at a mid-tier level, not like a managerial level. What are three things that you would suggest that person to start practicing so that uh, things improve? He or she improves the overall uh, personality as a leader and a better communicator. And once you have done that, then what are the three things that everyone has to drop, leave, so that the journey continues?
Okay. What I can do is share with you some things that have helped me, and perhaps that will resonate with some folks. One of the biggest lessons I still remember to this day from my master's program is one of our professors. He said it much more eloquently than what I'm going to share with you, but I'm paraphrasing here. One of the biggest lessons that I learned was to have an opinion. Don't just take up space. Have an opinion. Make sure it's an appropriate and an educated opinion. Uh, but keeping in mind that, and during that time, it was communication. So at that time, we weren't just communications professionals, but become all rounded business professionals who happen to be all stars in communications. So have an opinion. It's not just about getting a seat at that C-suite table, but how do you stay there? How do you stay there? To have an opinion, to offer diversity of thought, um, that's one of the biggest pieces, and the best way that you can. One of the ways that you can build influence and leadership is have an opinion, have an educated opinion, get curious, ask the right questions at the right time. Doesn't mean you have to be an expert in everything. Be an expert in your field, but have general interest and be able to carry a conversation and have an opinion about business matters all around or whatever the space you're in. The other piece to that is then whatever you're an expert in, make sure you're good. Like there's no shortcut to competency. You've got to be good at your thing. You've got to be competent. Otherwise, that in itself isn't going to carry you forward, right? Quite often you'll hear the phrase, fake it till you make it. Yeah, people can tell when you're faking it. People can tell when you're faking it, right? We're not that great of liars. Some people are, okay? But usually people can tell when you're faking it. So we've got to get good. And if you're looking to stand out, how do you infuse some of your personality into that so you don't just sound and look like everyone else? One of the things that helps me keep that in check is the relationship that I've learned between competence, confidence, and certainty. Competence, confidence, and certainty. So you mentioned Doreen and the chef example. So I'm gonna borrow that chef example to the best way that I can explain the relationship between competence, confidence, and certainty. If you're a chef, competence could look like being skilled at making things in the kitchen, right? Baseline competency. You need to be able to cook, bake, do whatever you've got to do, make some basic things. Confidence could look like, as long as I'm in my kitchen with the right equipment and utensils, I can make you anything you want. Certainty could look like, it doesn't matter where I am, what utensils I have, what equipment I have, whatever ingredients you give me, I'm going to make you a masterpiece. So we've got to get good. We've got to build that confidence and certainty to be able to stand out, because there's so much competition out there in the world these days in everything. How do we stand out? Infusing that personality in. So those are probably a couple of the biggest things that I can share. Part of that is all tied to self leadership. You've got to be able to lead yourself to some kind of growth or transformation. Uh, Otherwise, what business do you have leading others? I just did a training with the management and leadership team of a nonprofit a couple of days ago, and that's one of the things that I mentioned with them. It all starts with self leadership. If you can't lead yourself, what business do you have leading others? Leading yourself is an invitation to lead others, and that can look and that can come in different ways, shapes, and forms. That can look different for different people, but we've got to be able to lead ourselves to some kind of growth, some kind of evolution, in order for us to lead others. And keeping in mind, we're all leaders in some way, shape, or form. Title doesn't make you an automatic leader. Situational leadership is likely showing up for all of us. So we're all leaders in some way, shape, or form. How do you continue to influence and lead right from where you're at, regardless of title, role, position?
That's amazing. That's this these like three things with this chef example. Really, I'm sure it will actually seep um, um, into our minds. Anybody who's watching this video, probably that's one thing that if from this whole video, if you just take that one thing and start implementing into your own life, you will see a change. And being intentional around whatever you do will help you achieve your goals much faster. If you just if you want to be healthy, if you run one day and you don't run the next day, next 3 days, and then you run the fourth day, it's not going to work. Like, so it means that you're not serious enough. You're not putting in efforts into your building your health and things. What are one or two things that you think um, young people at mid-career level, excuse me, should stop doing to be able to kind of explore their own leadership traits and the journey, start the journey in the leadership space.
Mm-hmm. A couple of things come to mind. This again is all from personal experience. One of the traps that I've had to keep an eye out for myself is ego and insecurity, and knowing that ego and insecurity are two sides of the same coin. Ego fuels the insecurity, which fuels the ego. At least that's how it makes sense for me. I share with you a way. It's not the way, just a way. But for me, ego and insecurity are two sides of the same coin. So being careful of ego and insecurity, which ultimately means getting out of your own head and serving the clients, customers, leaders, teams that you're working on. The other piece is kindness. And I know these answers might seem a little foo-foo and in the clouds, Hamad, but these are core values that are critical for everybody, regardless of who you are, what age, what lifestyle, where you come from. This is one of the biggest lessons I learned from my mom. It's the lesson of kindness. So, my mom unfortunately passed away from cancer in 2022, and one of the things I did is I interviewed her as her health was slowly starting to go down, one of the questions I asked her was, Mom, what does the world need most right now? What does the world need most right now? One of the things she said was kindness. If we can be that much more kinder to each other, I'm inclined to think the world would be a better place.
Oh my man,
So,
what a beautiful,
kindness, ego, insecurity,
yeah.
but the biggest piece is kindness.
That's such an amazing way to conclude the session. Be kind, and that's one lesson I think. That's a lesson of humanity. Uh, I think there is no religion that doesn't teach kindness, and religion actually keeps us, like, gives us principles, right, to live. And kindness is at the top of every religion. So literally, every human being on this earth has to be kind. When you're kind with your own self, kind with your family, friends, your pets, money that you make. I mean, it just keeps going on. Param, thank you very much for giving your time. I know you're extremely busy, but it's always a pleasure to listen to you, get inspiration from your beautifully kind of crafted um, sentences and phrases. Really helps me, and I'm sure whoever is going to watch this video, whenever you're going to watch this video, you're going to learn from this video. Some very these are like fundamentals, and often what I see is that people forget those fundamentals. They start looking at, like, massive books and try to find that one word from that book. Listen to people who already have done it, and Param has done it. So follow Param on LinkedIn, and also, as I said, his podcast and his newsletter. So with that, Param, thank you very much. I'll stop recording, but we'll hang out for a few more minutes afterwards.